Los Angeles, September 1997. The city glittered with money, flashing neon in Hollywood, million-dollar homes tucked into the hills. Stacks of cash flowing through armored depots every single night. But deep inside a nondescript concrete building on Mateo Street, behind steel doors and reinforced locks, sat something even Hollywood couldn't script. Nearly $20 million in hard currency, waiting quietly for redistribution to banks. This was the Dunbar Armored Facility, the kind of place where money didn't just pass through, it lived, breathed, and piled higher than the imagination of most men. Protected, secure, untouchable. Or so it seemed. Because on the night of September 12, 1997, while the city slept, the largest cash heist in United States history was about to unfold. Not through brute force, not through wild gunfire or car chases, but through something colder, sharper, more intimate. It was an inside job. A man entrusted to guard the money instead used his access, his trust, and his knowledge of the system to betray it. And with him, 5 lifelong friends would walk into the vault of American history. By the end of that night, $18.9 million in cash would vanish into the Los Angeles darkness. And America would never forget the name, the Dunbar Armored Robbery. Every heist begins with a man who sees something others don't. For Dunbar, that man was Alan Pace III. On paper, Alan looked like the kind of employee you'd want safeguarding millions. He was the regional safety inspector for Dunbar, a man whose job it was to protect armored cars, study the cameras, check the locks, and ensure the guards were doing their job. If anyone understood the vulnerabilities of the depot, it was Alan. But Alan wasn't a protector. He was an opportunist. For months, some say years, he studied the building with a predator's patience. He knew which cameras were real and which were dummies. He knew which guards got lazy after midnight. He knew the rotation of keys, the exact moment the vault door would swing open, and how long the money sat unguarded on its pallets. Alan's mind was a blueprint. And as he walked those concrete corridors each day, he wasn't just inspecting security. He was imagining a heist. His heist. But even the sharpest plan needed a crew. And Alan knew exactly where to find one. Trust is the rarest currency in crime. Alan didn't want mercenaries or strangers. He wanted men who owed him loyalty, men who wouldn't talk. So he turned to his childhood friends. There were 5 of them, all men Alan had grown up with in Southern California. They weren't professional thieves. They weren't career criminals. But they trusted Alan, and that trust was worth millions. In the weeks leading up to the heist, the crew gathered in secret. Dimly lit garages, backyards at night, whispered conversations over beers. Alan laid out his plan with military precision. They would strike on a Friday night, when the vault was fullest. They would use Alan's keycard to enter without suspicion. They would wear black ski masks and gloves, moving with speed and silence. They would restrain the guards without violence, avoiding murder charges. And above all, they would be in and out in 30 minutes. No bullets. No alarms. No chaos. Just a clean, surgical robbery that would rewrite history. One by one, his friends nodded. The plan was crazy. But it was flawless. And Alan Pace became the architect of America's biggest cash theft. September 12, 1997. The city of Los Angeles hummed under its usual neon glow. But in one corner of the city, the Dunbar Depot sat quiet. Silent. Inside, the vault overflowed with Friday cash pickups, a record $18.9 million in bundled bills stacked high on wooden pallets. At 12:30 a.m., Alan used his employee key to let the crew inside. The security cameras? He already knew where they pointed, and how to avoid them. The men moved like shadows. In minutes, they overpowered the guards, binding their hands and forcing them to the ground. There was no shouting. No panic. Just cold, efficient control. Then came the vault. Alan entered the code, turned the key, and swung open the steel door he had checked 1,000 times before. Inside sat stacks of cash, bricks of green, each bundle worth thousands. The crew moved fast. Bag after bag was filled, duffels straining with weight as they hauled the fortune out to a waiting U-Haul truck. By 1 a.m., it was over. $18.9 million in cash had been stolen in less than half an hour. And as the truck rolled into the night, Los Angeles remained unaware that history had just been written in silence. For Alan Pace, the heist was only half the battle. The real challenge was what came after. He knew that $18.9 million wasn't just money. It was evidence. Traced bills, marked currency, serial numbers that could link back to Dunbar. So he gave the crew strict orders: no flashy spending. No cars. No jewelry. No sudden lifestyle changes. Instead, they would sit on the money, waiting for heat to die down. Over time, they would launder it through real estate deals, shell companies, and small investments. For years, it worked. Alan purchased properties. His crew bought businesses. The money slowly seeped into the Los Angeles economy like ink into water, impossible to pull back once diluted. The FBI hunted relentlessly. They interrogated guards, pored over surveillance, followed dead-end leads. But there were no fingerprints. No witnesses. No mistakes. For a time, it looked like Alan Pace had done the impossible. He had pulled off the perfect crime. But perfection doesn't last forever. One member of Alan's crew, unable to resist the pull of quick riches, grew sloppy. He used stolen Dunbar cash in a real estate transaction, and the bills were flagged. That single thread began to unravel the tapestry. The FBI traced the money back, connecting it to Alan's circle. Surveillance ramped up. Phone calls were tapped. Quiet deals were watched. Soon, the facade cracked. The evidence pointed to Alan Pace, the trusted safety inspector. The man who had walked the corridors of Dunbar with a clipboard, all the while planning to gut it from the inside. For the FBI, it was a revelation. For Alan, it was the beginning of the end. In 2001, for years after the robbery, the arrests began. One by one, Alan and his crew were rounded up. The charges were devastating: robbery, conspiracy, money laundering. Alan, as the mastermind, was sentenced to 24 years in federal prison. Of the $18.9 million stolen, authorities only recovered a fraction. Nearly $10 million vanished forever, buried, spent, or hidden in ways the FBI could never trace. The Dunbar facility, once considered secure, was left scarred. Policies changed. Security tightened. But the damage was done. America had seen its biggest cash heist, and the legend of Alan Pace was cemented. The Dunbar Armored Robbery remains one of the most studied heists in modern history. It wasn't the violence that shocked investigators. It wasn't the size of the loot. It was the betrayal. A man paid to safeguard millions instead used his insider knowledge to steal it. And in doing so, he exposed a truth that still haunts banks, armored car companies, and governments. Sometimes, the greatest threat isn't outside the vault, it's already inside. Alan Pace would spend decades behind bars. His crew, too. But the money? Much of it was never seen again. Somewhere in Los Angeles, hidden in walls, buried in ground, or long since laundered into clean accounts, millions of Dunbar's stolen dollars still exist. A ghost fortune. A perfect shadow. The Dunbar Armored Robbery wasn't just a crime. It was a story of loyalty, betrayal, greed, and patience. It showed that a single man, with enough knowledge and the right crew, could outwit an entire system, at least for a time. But it also showed that every heist leaves a trail. Every betrayal carries a cost. For Alan Pace, the cost was his freedom. For Dunbar, the cost was $18.9 million, much of it never returned. And for the rest of us, it was a reminder that sometimes, the greatest robberies aren't pulled off with ski masks and guns, but with trust. Trust, betrayed. And that is why the Dunbar Armored Robbery will always be remembered as America's biggest cash heist.